November 14th, 1962, 11:47 p.m. Ellsworth, Bumpy. Johnson stood in the back room of Small's Paradise on 135th Street, staring at three photographs spread across the mahogany table. Each one showed his daughter, Ruthie, leaving Columbia University's library. The timestamps were from yesterday. Across from him sat a man who didn't belong in Harlem. Tailored gray suit, CIA credentials in a leather wallet, cold blue eyes that had seen Guatemala, Iran, places where people disappeared. His name was Agent Russell Whitmore, and he'd just made the worst mistake of his 38-year life. Your daughter's a pretty girl, Johnson. Be a shame if her student visa got complicated, or if certain campus incidents required federal investigation. The threat was clear. The room held 6 people, 4 of Whitmore's associates, 1 of Bumpy's men, and the silence between them thick as smoke. Whitmore needed Bumpy to move $200,000 in heroin through Harlem's distribution network. Government heroin. From Southeast Asia. Part of some operation Bumpy didn't care to know about. Most men in Bumpy's position would have either complied or tried to kill the agent right there. But what Agent Whitmore didn't know was that Bumpy Johnson had spent 15 years learning how power really worked in America, and it wasn't found in violence. This is the story of how a street legend made the Central Intelligence Agency apologize. To understand what happened that November night, you need to understand 3 things. First, Russell Whitmore wasn't some rogue operative. He was a 12-year veteran of the CIA's Special Activities Division, with operational authority in 14 countries. The man had orchestrated coups. He'd made generals disappear. He carried the weight of American intelligence in every threat he made, and he knew it. In his world, a Harlem numbers runner, even one as legendary as Bumpy Johnson, was a problem solved with leverage and force. Second, Bumpy Johnson in 1962 wasn't the man who'd gone to prison in 1951. That man would have put 3 bullets in Whitmore and dealt with the consequences. But the 54-year-old Bumpy who came home in 1959 had spent a decade watching, learning, reading. He'd studied law books in Alcatraz, made connections with Italian mobsters who taught him how legitimate power worked, understood that real control came from knowing what powerful men feared most. Third, Ruthie Johnson was more than Bumpy's daughter. She was 22 years old, second-generation Harlem royalty, studying political science at Columbia on a merit scholarship. She represented everything Bumpy had built, proof that his world could create something clean. In a community where the NYPD could brutalize with impunity, where poverty crushed dreams daily, Ruthie was hope made flesh. The inciting incident came on November 12th. One of Whitmore's junior agents, a man named Carver, had approached Bumpy at the Cotton Club. The offer was simple. Use your network to move our product. Take a 15% cut. Keep your mouth shut. Bumpy declined. Politely. Said he'd left that business behind. 48 hours later, the photographs arrived with Whitmore's personal invitation. Most men would have seen 2 choices, compliance or war. But Bumpy Johnson wasn't most men. November 13th, 1962, 8:15 a.m. Bumpy made 4 phone calls from the payphone outside Ahmed's barbershop on Lenox Avenue. The first was to a lawyer named David Sullivan, white, respected, Harvard-educated. Sullivan had represented Bumpy during his parole hearings. More importantly, Sullivan's brother was deputy director of the FBI's New York field office. They'd had their differences with the CIA over jurisdictional matters. Long-standing differences. The second call went to Meyer Lansky in Miami. Bumpy didn't ask for soldiers. He asked for information. Any of your people in Washington who might know about CIA operations going freelance? Lansky said he'd check with his contacts at Justice. The third was to Adam Clayton Powell Jr., Harlem's congressman. Powell owed Bumpy 3 favors from the 1960 election. Bumpy collected 1. I need to know if the company is running narcotics operations without oversight. Quietly. The fourth call was to his daughter. Ruthie, I need you to stay with your aunt in Brooklyn for a few days. Don't ask questions. Do this for your father. For the next 30 hours, Bumpy Johnson became a student again. He learned that Whitmore's operation was, in fact, unsanctioned. A rogue unit skimming product from Southeast Asian operations, selling it domestic to fund off-book activities. 3 agents, $2 million annually, 0 accountability. They'd been operating for 18 months, using local distributors as cutouts. always through leverage and blackmail. He learned that the CIA's Inspector General had been quietly investigating financial irregularities in the Special Activities Division. Names hadn't been named yet, but the investigation was active. He learned that Whitmore had done this before, twice in New Orleans, once in Chicago. Always got away with it because local criminals either complied out of fear or died mysteriously before they could talk. By November 14th at 9 p.m., Bumpy had what he needed. Not a gun, not soldiers, not violence. Information, connections, and the understanding that powerful institutions hated embarrassment more than they hated crime. Whitmore had demanded a meeting that night at Small's Paradise. Neutral ground. Public enough to be safe, private enough to talk business. He arrived at 11:35 p.m. with 4 associates, all armed, all confident. They took the back room, ordered drinks they wouldn't touch, and waited for Bumpy to see reason. The November air outside was cold, biting. Inside Small's Paradise, jazz played, a trumpet solo that seemed to echo the tension building in that back room. The few patrons in the main bar knew something was happening. They always did. Harlem had a way of sensing when power was about to shift. Whitmore checked his watch. 3 minutes before midnight. That's when Bumpy walked in. Alone. Wearing a dark blue suit, crisp white shirt, no weapon visible. He moved like a man without fear, and that made Whitmore's associates nervous. One hand went subtly toward a shoulder holster. Bumpy sat down, looked at the photographs of his daughter, looked at Whitmore. So, Whitmore said, lighting a cigarette, "Are we going to be reasonable, or do I need to make my point more clearly?" The room went silent except for the distant trumpet. 11:58 p.m. "Let me tell you what's going to happen," Bumpy said. His voice was quiet, calm, the voice of a man explaining something obvious to a child. "You're going to take those photographs. You're going to leave Harlem. And you're going to never speak my daughter's name again." Whitmore laughed. Actually laughed. "You think you can threaten me? Do you understand who you're talking to?" "I understand exactly who I'm talking to." Bumpy reached into his jacket, slowly, showing his hands. Whitmore's men tensed. But Bumpy only pulled out a manila envelope, placed it on the table between them. Russell Whitmore, Special Activities Division. Guatemala Station, 1954. Iran, 1957. Currently running unsanctioned narcotics operations using product diverted from Operation Momentum in Laos. Total revenue approximately $2.3 million since March 1961. Partners, Agent Carver, Agent DeMarco, and your supervisor's nephew, Agent Holloway. What Russell Whitmore didn't know was that Bumpy Johnson had spent 11 years in federal prison networking with men who knew how to build cases. Men who understood that the federal government was a machine of competing parts, and those parts loved to cannibalize each other. Whitmore's face changed. The confidence drained out like water from a cracked glass. "That envelope," Bumpy continued, "contains bank account numbers, dates of heroin shipments, names of your distributors in 3 cities, and a sworn affidavit from one of your Chicago contacts who got tired of being squeezed. You're bluffing. There's a copy of that envelope in 3 locations. One with my attorney, David Sullivan. His brother's FBI, in case you forgot. The Bureau would love to know the company's moving heroin domestically. Creates all kinds of jurisdictional questions they've been dying to press." Bumpy leaned forward. "Second copies with Congressman Adam Clayton Powell's office. Marked to be opened if anything happens to me or my family. Powell's been looking for ammunition against CIA overreach since the Bay of Pigs. You'd be perfect." The room had gone colder than the November night outside. "And the third copy?" Whitmore's voice was barely controlled. "The third copy goes to your Inspector General's office. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., unless I make a phone call to stop it." That's when Russell Whitmore understood. He wasn't fighting a criminal. He was fighting a man who'd learned to weaponize the same system that was supposed to protect Whitmore. The CIA's Inspector General investigation would become a full exposure. The FBI would use it for leverage in their turf wars. Powell would hold congressional hearings. Whitmore's career wouldn't just end. He'd face federal prosecution. Prison time. The same prisons where Bumpy Johnson was a legend. One of Whitmore's associates stood up, hand moving to his weapon. "We can't let him. Sit down." Whitmore's voice cracked like a whip. The man sat. Bumpy hadn't moved, hadn't raised his voice, hadn't even blinked. "Most men would have tried to kill me," Whitmore said quietly. "Why didn't you?" Because dead CIA agents bring heat I don't need. And because you threatening my daughter told me everything I needed to know about you. Which is that you're scared. Desperate men make stupid threats. They use leverage they think is untouchable. But you forgot something. Bumpy stood up. You forgot that I've been playing this game since you were learning to shave. And in my game, the man who stays calm wins. Bumpy picked up the photographs of his daughter. Put them in his pocket. You have until 8:45 a.m. to be out of New York. I'll make my phone call at 9. But if I ever hear your name in connection with my family, my neighborhood, or my city again. He buttoned his suit jacket. That third envelope gets opened, along with a fourth copy you don't know about, the one going to the Washington Post. The room stayed silent for 10 seconds after Bumpy left. Then Whitmore said, very quietly, pack everything. We're leaving tonight. By 3 a.m., Russell Whitmore and his team were on a train to Washington, D.C. By morning, every major player in Harlem knew what had happened. Not the details. Bumpy didn't traffic in gossip. But they knew a CIA agent had come to threaten Bumpy Johnson, and that agent had left New York before sunrise, looking over his shoulder. The story moved through the networks, to the Italians downtown, to the other families, to the cops who worked organized crime. The message was clear. Bumpy Johnson had evolved. He wasn't just muscle and street smarts anymore. He'd learned to fight with the weapons powerful men feared most: exposure, leverage, institutional politics. Meyer Lansky called 2 days later. I heard what you did. Clean. Smart. That's how you build something that lasts. Adam Clayton Powell never opened his envelope, but he kept it in his office safe for 3 years and made sure certain people knew it existed. Insurance, he called it. Respect, Bumpy called it. Russell Whitmore's career quietly ended in February 1963. The official record said he resigned to pursue private sector opportunities. Those in the know understood what that meant. The Inspector General's investigation caught 3 other agents. Whitmore avoided prison, barely, by cooperating fully and keeping his mouth shut about his Harlem humiliation. 1 week after that November night, Bumpy sat with his daughter at a small restaurant in Brooklyn. Ruthie was angry he'd sent her away without explanation. But she was safe, and that was all that mattered. There are men in this world, Bumpy told her, who think power comes from what they can take from you. They're wrong. Real power is knowing what they can't afford to lose. Ruthie studied her father's face. And you knew what that man couldn't afford to lose. His career, his freedom, his image of himself as untouchable. Bumpy smiled. Same things we all can't afford to lose. I just made sure he knew I could take them away easier than he could take you. Years later, in 1968, when Bumpy Johnson died, the obituaries would call him a gangster, a criminal, a relic of Harlem's darker past. They wouldn't mention the CIA agent he defeated without firing a shot. They wouldn't mention the lessons he'd learned about how power really worked in America. But in Harlem, in the barbershops and jazz clubs and street corners where real history lived, they remembered. They told the story to younger generations as a lesson. Violence is easy. It's also temporary. But understanding the game, really understanding it, that's what makes you dangerous. That's what makes you legendary. On November 14, 1962, Ellsworth, Bumpy Johnson faced down the Central Intelligence Agency with no gun, no army, no violence. He won because he understood something most street legends never learn. The system's power comes from secrecy, reputation, and the illusion of being above consequences. Threaten those 3 things, and even the CIA becomes just another player who can lose. Real power isn't about being the toughest man in the room. It's about being the smartest. It's about knowing your enemy's pressure points better than they know yours. It's about staying calm when everyone expects you to explode. If this story changed how you think about power, hit that subscribe button. This channel exists to tell the real stories. The ones where intelligence defeats violence, where strategy beats strength, where one man with knowledge becomes more dangerous than an army with guns. Hit like if you believe real strength is staying calm when everyone expects you to lose control. Drop a comment. Who's the most underestimated strategic mind in street history? I'm reading every response. Next video, the night Malcolm X and Bumpy Johnson stopped a race riot with one conversation. The story that never made the history books. Remember, when they threaten what you love, don't react like they expect. React like they fear. That's real power.